Hello, everyone. Welcome to another D-Scout and People Nerds webinar. This month, we are focusing on a use case with our remote qualitative platform. I have a very, very smart, outdoor-focused thinker, researcher, designer, leader, Vanessa Dillof. Vanessa Dillof leads insights at the North Face specifically, but VF outdoor brands broadly. Vanessa, welcome.
Thank you so much, Ben, and hello, everybody. Happy Monday, and hope this is a good accompaniment to your lunch or whatever you happen to be doing today. But yeah, looking forward to sharing this case study with you all. So, Ben, should I just dive in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, again, please use the Q&A. Vanessa will be doing the driving. I'll interject with your questions where relevant, and let's get going, Vanessa.
Cool. All right. Well, let's go to the next slide here. Some of you may be familiar with this image. If you're not, this is Alex Honnold, one of the about 150 or so athletes that we keep on our global athlete team, arguably now the most famous on our roster. As some of you may know, Alex was featured in a documentary called Free Solo that won at the Oscars this past year, and as you can see, Alex is a climber. There's a few things missing in this image, most notably a rope. Alex climbed El Capitan in Yosemite without the use of anything other than his hands and legs and body. And he is just a remarkable figure and a remarkable human being that you, kind of all of us as researchers can appreciate, that he's somebody that you would just want to talk to as an interesting person. But if you're in a job like mine where he is arguably, you know, the best climber in the world and we are the makers of outdoor apparel and gear, he is certainly somebody that how could you not talk to and have a relationship with on a day-to-day basis. And that was really kind of the impetus behind the athlete intelligence program that we decided to create. Is we had a lot of Alexes out there in the world, but not a great way to really connect with them. And so there were kind of three main goals that kind of started the program for us, which we're now in about our third year of the program, and it's just continued to grow over that time. But really the first goal was we needed a way to get honest feedback from these sources that we couldn't get this insight anywhere else. You know, you could go out and you could talk to mainstream consumers, and we do a lot of that as well, and it's super important to balance that. But these kind of extreme leading edge users for us, we didn't have a great platform to interact with them. The previous way that we were kind of engaging with them was a lot of bullet points and a lot of emails back and forth. And as you can imagine, Alex has a lot of things to do in his day, but one of the things that he doesn't enjoy as much is spending a lot of time in front of a desktop computer, kind of interacting with people over here in corporate land. And so we needed a better way, a more useful tool to really reach our athletes where they wanted to be reached, and using a tool that we knew that they would have with them at all times. And the cell phone was kind of the one thing that allowed us to do that. And so I'll get into more of how that was the right way for us to interact, but it certainly changed the game for how we were interacting with them. Sorry, Ben, if you can just go back one slide there. So the second kind of reason here was really we had a process with our athlete team that was just cumbersome. They were getting asked a lot of the same questions over and over again because we had no centralized portal to really engage. And so, you know, we would have one designer reaching out in 1 week and then another person the next week saying, you know, a very similar type of request. And so just having a system and a way in which we could manage that feedback was super important. And then the third one here was really, we needed to humanize these people. There was a lot of great wear testing feedback coming in, and we were certainly incorporating that into the organization. But at the end of the day, for designers, like, these were people and they had real stories. And that part of it just wasn't coming through. And in fact, I think our designers were getting frustrated that there was a lot of wear testing feedback coming through and a lot of changes being asked for in the product that we were creating, but they didn't necessarily know the why behind that. And this platform really allowed us to start to change that so that they understood the broader context behind some of the feedback that they were getting. So going on to the next bit of it, yeah, what is it? So it's pretty simple. We basically submit, for those of you that are familiar with kind of D-Scout language, we submit a mission to our athlete team. Those missions can be super targeted, so they literally can go to one individual if we want, or more commonly within our organization, what we've done is kind of built profiles of the different types of users that we want to get feedback from. So I may just send a mission to our climbers, for example, or I may just send a mission to our skiers, or kind of various forms. Generally for us, it's a lot by activity, but we can also just send missions to our female athlete team if that's what we want to kind of get feedback on, or it can go out to everybody depending on the ask. The athletes receive those missions, as I talked about, on their smartphones, and the beauty for us is we literally can send these missions wherever the athletes are in the world, which for us takes us to the extreme ends of the earth, and they can capture their feedback in video form, audio form, as well as kind of quantitative feedback wherever they are, and then when they're back in cell phone range and cell phone land, that feedback will automatically upload to us. So it's a fantastic way for us to get real-time feedback literally on the side of mountains, and capture that context in a way that we otherwise were completely missing prior to the platform. And then as those missions get completed, we have now that database that I was kind of talking about that really allows us to see all of this feedback aggregated. We can sort by a certain athlete, so we can go in and look at anything that Alex Honnold has ever said over the course of the 3 years if we wanted to do that, and do a lot of kind of cool filtering and just analysis of the feedback on the back end. So the tool and specifically that we use is called Diary within D-Scout. It's a pretty cool platform that I'll kind of walk through some screenshots of. You can see here on the next slide. So I think it's just coming up here. Yeah, the way that the athletes kind of get invited into the mission, we can send an email. It's completely customized. We can use, actually, in most cases, we use a lot of our athlete imagery, so they see themselves. When they kind of come into the mission, they see this both on their mobile device and in their email. You can see they get a notification that there's a mission ready for them, how long they have to complete it, which we tend to give our athletes a bit of time, because a lot of times they're out exploring the world and have better things to do than to complete our surveys. But you can do this as a short as a 24-hour turnaround in some cases to, kind of leaving these missions more open-ended. And then, once the athlete kind of accepts that mission, which is the first step, and we see kind of which athletes have kind of entered into our mission and which have accepted, then we can ask them all different sorts of questions. And from our end, some of the most, I think, interesting feedback that we get is straight from the open-ended video format. So one of the biggest criteria that I had, I think, in kind of looking at vendors across this process is I really wanted a tool that was idiot-proof. Our athletes definitely don't, engaging with technology is not their preferred way to spend the day. They'd much rather engage with nature and other things. And so here, literally, they push a red button and they're recording, and we just get really raw, honest feedback through that medium. It's not complicated. It doesn't feel like a survey in a lot of cases. It just feels like they're talking to us directly. And I think our athletes really appreciate that, and we do as well. So the video functionality has been huge for us. There also is the ability, though, to ask a lot of different quantitative questions and ways to kind of dig in deeper, and that certainly plays a role for us as well. So it's really a nice mix of the qual and the quant. So this just gives you a little bit of the capture on the back end. So if that's what the athlete sees, I thought it might be helpful for some of you just to see a little bit of what it looks like on our end of things. If you're, if you're the client, and this is kind of me logging in to the portal, kind of what it looks like from my point of view. And here's what I was kind of talking about earlier, where, we can go into a mission, we can see all of the individual athletes here kind of coming up and what each of them had to say. You can also hopefully start to pick out here, we literally have people hanging off the side of, massive cliffs and kind of ice climbing and showing us how this gear is used in context, which for us just to be able to have that scenario on top of the feedback. It's one thing if you're getting bullet points in an email, but you lose completely. Is it a cloudy day? Is it a sunny day? What are they wearing underneath the jacket? All of that we can kind of capture with the visuals and the audio that we're getting from the teams. They can also just kind of get really close and tight in, as you can see on a couple of these shots of, you know, where they might be experiencing wear and tear, or some of those things that we want to be able to address. We can provide a layer of richness that we just didn't have there before for our designers and our team. So hopefully you see some familiar faces here, Conrad Anker, Jimmy Chin. So we got just a great athlete team giving us a ton of richness every day.
Vanessa, this is great.
Yeah.
We've got a few questions from attendees about the particular group that you used for your sample. Could you talk a little bit about who these people are? Is this anyone who's a member of the athlete team? Is it a subset? How did you select who would be a part of the AI program?
Yeah, good question. For us, anybody that's a member of the athlete team is a part of the program in some capacity. We have kind of different layers within our athlete team. So as I was mentioning, you know, in some cases, we might send a mission to the full athlete team. In other cases, it may just go to certain folks within that. But everybody who's a part of the athlete team in some way is submitting feedback to some missions.
And what was the process like to onboard the athletes? Did you and your team have training sessions with them? Did you lean on D-Scout for this? How did you get, because like you said, these athletes are professionals in another area of their life. How did you get them to feel comfortable with and get comfortable using D-Scout? Yeah,
for sure. So a couple of different ways. One was once a year we have an athlete summit where we do all get together, and it's a big opportunity for the brand and us kind of more kind of brand and corporate folks to kind of engage with the athlete team in person. So we launched the program at one of those summits where we were able to kind of walk them through, you know, okay, we're all going to download D-Scout on our phones now, and kind of steps 1, 2, 3 on how to do that. But then relied heavily on the D-Scout customer service team, which has been phenomenal for for this project to engage with the athletes if they were having any trouble once missions actually started. And a number of our athletes would just reach out and say, you know, help me with X, Y, and Z. There was always somebody there, either on our team directly or on the D-Scout team to support them to get up and running.
Cool. That's awesome. And we're getting a lot of other questions about some of the tactical stuff. What did you do with these data? How did you roll it up? I think you're going to get to it in a second. So why don't we keep going?
Cool. All right. So let me just set up this video real quick here.
Sorry. Yeah, it auto-plays.
The next one either. So just to give you guys a sense, so I thought it would be helpful to show you a little bit of like sometimes what do we get back from the athletes. A lot of different types of feedback, but in this case, this was actually a video where we just asked them, you know, to literally kind of just talk to us about their lives. And again, kind of getting at that human side of this. This was an introductory video. It was one of the first things that we did when we launched the D-Scout platform. And ultimately a video that we not just showed our employees here to give them a little bit of an understanding of who is on our athlete team, but this is actually a way where we went back and showed the athletes, look, hey, we're listening, and we shared this video with them as well, which they really enjoyed, which is super important part of this process is to make sure that the people on the other side that you're collecting that feedback from ultimately hear back from you. And this is one of the ways in which we did that.
Hi, North Facers.
Hi.
Hello. Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi.
Hey. Hey there.
Hello.
Hello. Hey, good morning.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
How's it going, lads?
Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
Yo, what's up? Ciao.
Hey, guys. Ah, bonjour. Some funny thing about me that you might not know is that I'm quite good at DIY. I like restoring houses. Plastering is really not my forte. My forte is lifting heavy things because I find it's an unusual way of working out.
I like to clean the house because I find it to be quite meditative.
Now we're about to walk into what is my favorite room of the house.
This is where all of my sports stuff stay. You can see I got my skis there. They're getting ready for winter.
I chose to show you guys my wood shop. My wife and I like to produce a lot of our own organic food on our property, which is here in our greenhouse.
This is my gear room. This is where I spend a lot of time thinking about projects, thinking about training, thinking about life, thinking about new adventures.
Right now I'm at my home in Salt Lake, which I built. This is me and John's rock shelf. These are the boots that we climb Rainier in. These are the nail plates that we used for crampons and tied them to our feet. So some little memorabilia. All of these rocks up are all from the summits of different mountains around the West.
Something not a lot of people would know about me is that I'm scared of heights, still kind of, and it's something I'm constantly overcoming.
My number one goal in life is to learn how to speak another language.
I volunteer at San Quentin State Prison, where I help run a running club in the prison for the inmates.
Right now I'm in Chamonix, France. My spirit animal is a gazelle, except for the month of August when I'm in Chamonix. Then I transform into a chamois, which is a mountain goat antelope mix. Much better for going uphill.
I once ran through the White House, literally.
When I was younger, I learnt to climb before I could walk, and that scared my parents a lot when I was little.
When I was a kid, I lived in a teepee. Now, I got a couple teepees in my backyard. Hey look, there they are.
This is my home village. This is my home mountain, the Matterhorn. This is the Grand Marais. And this is my home.
I'm recording this video in my new home, which is a mobile home. 23-foot RV, what it looks like for the most part. So I'm mobile, ready to chase the snow.
I've never eaten at McDonald's.
I love French fries. Yep, that's me.
I actually really dislike being cold, and winter is my least favorite season. I think that's why I ski, is it makes the whole year wonderful. Ciao.
Peace.
All right, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of a feel for how we bring some of this to life. But I'll start to get into some of the output, because I know there's a number of questions as I was just going through on how do we bring kind of action to this within the organization. So hopefully I'll start to address some of that for you guys in the next few slides. So what you're looking at here is one of the ways that we do that. So we take all of this great rich feedback that we're getting, the video being one platform, but another is we've kind of created a little mini magazine within the organization that we call the Explorer, where we bring some of this insight to life for our teams here internally, as well as for the athletes themselves. So you'll see here, this is an example of one of those magazines that we shared at the Athlete Summit a couple years ago now, but we've kind of had installments of this throughout the organization. Just a fun way for the athletes to learn more about each other, because they often only get to interact with each other a couple times a year through North Face events, et cetera, and so they really enjoy it, but then a way for our organization to really start to learn about them as well. And so you'll see here just a couple more examples. These are snippets that were featured in the magazine, but also that we built huge kind of boards that lived in our cafeteria and other areas, kind of common areas throughout the organization. Again, just trying to give everybody exposure to some of the insights that we were getting through the platform, and fun and kind of easy ways for everybody to start to engage. And so here's an example of just some of the passions that our athletes have outside of sport. And that was really, again, just trying to bring these people to life as more than one dimension. We know that they're hugely passionate about their sports and their activities, but what else do they care about? And those adjacencies can be really rich for our marketing teams and for other groups within the organization to be thinking about. Again, just some more examples of that. What's inspirational for them? We know our athletes are hugely inspirational for a lot of different people, but I think this was just one of the questions. I often will reach out to the organization and say, just what do you want to learn from the team? And we submit anybody can kind of submit questions that they think are interesting to us to include in future studies. And this was one that, was like, okay, they're so inspirational to us, but what inspires them? And then what would they be doing if they weren't an athlete? And I think we got a lot of really interesting, a lot of creative and other forms of exploration. Our brand stands for exploration, and we saw that just our athlete team epitomizes in a lot of cases creativity and exploration in all forms, art and photography and music being really, really big.
Vanessa, what were some of the sources of inspiration for the questions? You mentioned that your marketing team had some things that they were interested in. I know from working with your team at North Face that the design team was very integral in creating some of the questions and the ultimate insights. Who were some of the other stakeholders? I know this served the organization in an empathy injecting way, but were there other direct stakeholders for these sorts of stories and data?
Yeah, it really, I think we would customize a mission to different sets of stakeholders. So sometimes it's very specific and it is, around a specific product, and we're getting wear testing feedback primarily to impact, product management and design. So we'll run, missions around that. In other cases, it may be as broad as like, what does exploration mean to you? And that's really to help inspire, maybe a creative brief for our marketing org. So I would say, different leaders within the organization have certainly benefited from a uniform tool that can be used and applied in a lot of different ways. So I think it's touched almost every function within our company at this point.
That's great. And we have a few outstanding questions about about how the participants were, I guess, incentivized. I think it's important that we clarify that these were folks who were on the North Face team. And so this was part of their sponsorship, was that they had part obligation, part opportunity to review the gear that they used each and every day and to try to make it better. Could you talk a little bit more about how you framed this ask to those very busy athletes?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and we're fortunate in this case that yes, it is literally written into their contract that they give us feedback. But I think where the athletes were motivated is that had been in there for quite some time. That was part of their engagement as being part of the athlete team. But they weren't satisfied, quite honestly, with how that process was working, and we weren't satisfied. And I kind of talked about some of those challenges, but from the athlete's perspective, they kind of felt like in a lot of cases that feedback would go into a black hole, or maybe a designer moves into another part of the organization and then they're telling the same thing to that new designer because maybe the athlete's on the team longer than our designers might be in that role. And so how did we find a way to make sure that the athletes really felt like they were being heard? And I think that's where I'm pretty confident now the athletes would participate in this even if it wasn't written into their contract, because they feel like they do have a voice and they're being listened to and that we're responsive to what they're saying. And that has made all the difference in the world. It doesn't hurt that they're kind of contractually obligated to be my participants, but I think they would do it above and beyond.
Yeah, I think for me, it's striking. I've worked with some customers who have either member lists or they're doing research. They want to do qualitative work with their own employees. And I think like you said at the outset, you could very easily just send these folks open-ended questions or survey questions in an email, but when are they in front of a desktop? When are they really going to hammer out a 4 or 5 line response on this carabiner accessory that's built into their bat? You can tell that I am not an outdoors person by training, but this sort of, your design team is craving very specific, actionable feedback that is rather challenging to coax out of someone via a text response, at least, sitting on a keyboard. And so I think it struck me just as how you leverage the videos to both capture richer data for your product design marketing teams, and also to enable easier feedback offering from these athletes. And I think that's a lesson that you could take to any sort of hard to reach, hard to engage participant or member group.
Yeah, the other thing I would just build on that is we were very clear with the athletes up front of what this was going to be used for as well. So, that this really was a research tool, and that their feedback would be used for those purposes, that it wasn't something that we were going to, take, some of their quotes and their feedback on a product, and all of a sudden it's going to be showing up in, an ad campaign in the next couple of weeks. So I really did have to work just at the beginning as well internally to make sure that people understood there's kind of this church and state relationship, and certainly we can reach back out to the athletes if there's something that we want to leverage, external to the organization. but also just being really respectful with the athletes of what this feedback is for and what it's not.
That's great. I have a few more questions about the field work, but let's keep going because you have a few more great slides about the share outs and the deliverables that you've produced for your stakeholders.
Great, yeah. So again, just a few more of those examples. We try to make it very visually based here because again, that's the richness of the platform. As yes, we're getting some text-based feedback, but we're just getting a lot of great insight. And so here you can just see, we just wanted to know, like, what does home look like? And, we got a lot more bags and cars than we did actual homes, which was really interesting for us and super insightful because, a lot of these folks on our athlete team, they're mobile, they're ready to chase the snow, as you kind of saw in that video. And so home takes on a lot of different forms, and that was just inspirational, I think, for the team here. Again, they kind of explain that. You can see a lot of the different ways that we saw a lot of, when we asked them to show us their home, it was also a lot of focus on the garage or the green spaces outside the home or where the sun came through. And so it was just like, what is important to them and what does home mean? I think we saw, it was very apparent that it wasn't the traditional way that, most people will show you kind of their living room. We didn't see a lot of living rooms. We saw a lot of other things. I think that was particularly cool to just, again, start to humanize and really bring to life this persona for the organization. So I wanted to, it's not all qual, and I thought that was an important point, is we definitely look at this quantitatively as well, and I thought this might be helpful for some of you out there that maybe are in more quantitative organizations. I was in one of those for about 10 years of my career, so it's, always trying to cater the insights to the organization. So we do a bit of quant as well through the tool. One of the ways that we do that is we've set up, this is just an example of how we might do a wear test, through the tool. And so we're looking at kind of whatever the key metrics are for that particular product. In this case, we kind of identified 4 kind of key benefits that we wanted to evaluate the product on. This is completely dummy data, by the way. Looks like this product, if it existed, didn't do so well on the waterproofing, but just wanted to kind of more articulate the point than the actual research. But you can see, we'll kind of send this out, and this is something that we'll use with our leadership team. So we'll kind of go through, we'll do an athlete study, we'll include a quote along with each of these features so that they can get a little bit of the human side as well. But they've got overall a summary takeaway for the key measures of that product that we're looking at. And then on the right-hand side, we're calling out some key points that we really want that executive audience to understand from the study. And then another way, so, videos, the magazine, that quantitative summary. Another way is just also just engaging with the users in person. And I think that is important. While DScout is, predominantly a mobile tool, it can also come to life for us in in-person events with these users. And so I thought that was super important to mention as well, is sometimes we'll take the feedback from the tool and we'll use these in-person once-a-year events that we have with the team to really expand upon those ideas. And so you can kind of see in that bottom middle image, we'll literally bring some of the videos from the DScout platform to life. We have headphones and kind of stations set up at the summit where the athletes themselves can kind of listen in and hear some of the feedback. Because one of the things that we also heard that may be applicable to some of you is, the athletes, sometimes they're contradicting each other, and if you're left as the designer on the other end of things, it's like, well, who do I listen to and why? And so it is helpful for the athletes to understand the other feedback that's coming into the organization, so that they can sympathize and empathize kind of with what other athletes are saying. And ultimately, hopefully it doesn't change their perspective, but it does give them the context that, look, maybe our job as designers is a lot harder when we're getting 40 different athletes feedback back, and sometimes they're contradicting each other. So some of these in-person events help us to bring that dimension to life. So finally, just a couple slides in closing, just kind of talking about the impact it's had within our organization. So I've kind of hit on this one a couple of times already, but to go from kind of this bulleted point email feedback to like these really deep kind of, very raw stories. And I think at the start of this, we were concerned, how honest would the team be? Would we get, real information through this platform? And I can tell you, from mission one, that fear was set aside within the organization. In some cases, maybe too raw and too honest, and really kind of, making They didn't hold back, which I think was, our biggest concern. But we have definitely not seen that. We've seen quite the opposite, that we've got this really great portal into their lives. The second piece of this is, we'd much rather get this feedback early on in our design process and in our campaign development process, right? So that we can address these issues. Before, sometimes we would go to these athletes literally at a product launch and say, great, put this all over your Instagram, and, here's X, Y, and Z ways that we want you to promote this. But we didn't necessarily have the athletes buy-in from the start of the process. Now they feel like they're definitely co-creators in this process. And so when we're coming to them at the end, they're like, of course, yeah, I've been involved in this throughout. I know what it is, and I support it. So that was a really important piece of all of this. And then finally, we finally have this, kind of one place where all of this lives within our organization, which is just super important, that anybody within the organization has access, can understand and learn about the athlete team. So as we onboard new employees, et cetera, they can all come in, see the feedback that we already have, and be much more thoughtful and conscientious about the type of feedback that we need to bring in, that's in addition to what we've already got. And then, so finally, maybe just, a few pieces of guidance or advice if you're thinking about doing missions similar to this one. One thing that we definitely learned with our athlete team, that I don't think it's unique to our athlete team, I think it's, kind of just speaks to where humanity is at right now in our society, is, surveys are not, something that people want to spend 30 minutes engaging with, right? And so, we started this out with we'll have 5 parts, and we were very thoughtful about each part, and we realized, that's 4 parts too many. We've got to keep this really tight, really simple, and our athletes ultimately, if we have 1 part, they may expand upon that, but let that be their choice, rather than forcing 5 parts on them, and giving them an exhaustive questionnaire to fill out that they just don't want to do. So we'd rather leave it kind of more up to them to give us more rather than less, rather than demanding it from the start. I think the second thing here was really that this ability to interact, there's something still about all of us that love kindergarten and show and tell, and this platform has really allowed us to do that in a very visual and kind of just fun way, so that it doesn't feel like it's, taking a survey, or it doesn't even feel like research. It just feels like they're talking to us and they're showing us things that they think are interesting or cool, which is great. And then the final piece for us of why I think this platform has worked so well for our needs is the context. If you're, particularly for those of you that might be kind of in the design realm or just creatives of some kind of having this context is so valuable for us. So yeah, you could talk to somebody, through their computer while they're on the couch or some of those other things, or, we all kind of talk about the glass mirror and those types of situations within research. But for us to be able to be in these real situations, to be able to see their homes, to be able to see what's going on, on the mountain, if we can't be there always ourselves. And it's always a mix. We do a lot of real in-person ethnographies and that type of work as well. But to get that at scale, and to have 150 athletes at once kind of giving us that context has been super rich and valuable for the teams getting, it just adds another layer to the feedback that we wouldn't get otherwise.
That's awesome. And as you can see, Vanessa, we've got a ton of really good questions around a couple of different parts of the project. So I'm hoping that we can go back to this slide, or this guy right here. So for those of you out there who are new to DScout, this is the researcher dashboard. So this is what Vanessa and her team see as the individual athletes answer those questions that make up the mission, which are called entries. A bunch of jargon, short enough to say these are little data packets that she used to iterate and share feedback internally. So Vanessa, I'm hoping we could talk about at the top, who was the team pointing this effort? Because I know when I went out there with you, I met with the design team, and I had a lot of great questions from them. But we have some questions around who were the day-to-day managers of these missions. Was it your team on Insights? Was it in collaboration with other teams? Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. At the outset, definitely this was born out of the Insights team, which I head here at the brand, but it was always my long-term goal that this didn't need to be something that is led by the Insights team long-term, that anybody should be able to go in and interact with our athlete team. That's been the goal, and that's the reality that we're now starting to see. So, you know, as Ben mentioned, he was out here on site. He trained our design team, our product management team. You know, our sports marketing team does a lot of engagement with our athletes, and we're part of that training. So ultimately, I want everybody within the organization that is a key stakeholder to feel comfortable to be able to at least start and establish a mission, reach out to the D-Scout team, you know, for help and guiding that. And then the Insights team, we know we have kind of a very basic, if you want to start a mission, you know, let us know. And so we get it up and running. There's kind of just a way very simply within the organization that we ask a few key questions about the type of mission and why. And we're kind of the I hate to use the word gate check or, you know, just kind of, but we are kind of involved in consulting on that mission, but we're not necessarily leading it. And that's critical because we're a small team here, you know, 2 Insights folks at the brand. So if we were blocking every mission or kind of being the filter for every mission, my goal of getting this feedback out there, there'd be a long backlog. And so, you know, now we're in the field, you know, often, you know, several times a quarter, kind of engaging with the athlete team. I wish it would, you know, I hope it even gets to be more than that as we go on. But that's kind of where we've gotten to at this point.
That's great. And to reiterate, for those of you who might not have heard, there are 2 Insights in the entire of the brand. And so you're very much running like an agency. And I hear this from some of the research leaders with whom I speak, that they're really hoping to democratize access to qualitative research broadly defined. It sounds like you found a really nice way of doing that. So someone maybe on the design team for a particular sport has a question about a gear segment or a subset of the athletes. They you know, submit a set of questions to you or have a meeting with you, and then you and your team, the Insights team, launch this mission. And then, you know, how often are you communicating with the athletes? I guess it very much depends on the kind of thing that you're asking the athletes to do. But what's the cadence of communicating with the athletes once they're in the mission? How often are you reminding them or checking in with them for any one of these missions?
Yes, you know, some of the missions are just, you know, a one-time deal, but one of the great things as well about, you know, the platform is it does allow us to do longitudinal stops. So, you know, on a specific product, if we're looking, you know, particularly if we're looking for wear and tear or durability, those things take time and they take a number of uses. And so we might ask them, you know, over the next, you know, 6 months, we want you documenting every week, you know, kind of how did you use this product this week? What was your reactions to it? And how is and then we'll do kind of one final mission at the end of that process where we're kind of asking them to summarize their feedback over that full period. And so the week by week communication may be very, very simple. It's literally just come in, log in, tell us what you used the product for this week and how it performed. But then kind of at the back end of the close of that 3 or 6 months, they might be reacting and kind of filling out more detailed information for us. So it kind of runs the gamut depending on our needs, but we've done everything as short as, you know, 48 hours, kind of get us some one-time feedback to, you know, something that is more 3-6 months in nature. And in that case, yeah, we're definitely kind of hounding them a little bit. I freely admit, you know, we're not shy about kind of reminding them of their role and making sure that they're submitting that feedback. One of the things that we have done that's really helped there is also just we're not shy about kind of calling out who is already submitted and kind of doing fun things around that, kind of sharing some of the early feedback that we get. That's a really nice way to get some of the other athletes involved, just kind of, you know, saying, okay, we've got X, Y, and Z already kind of coming into the platform. We'd love to hear from you.
That's great. So you're reminding the athletes that they're all in this together, and you at times might even share feedback that they provide with one another, like so-and-so said this about this. What do you think? I love that way of engaging, to remind them that they're a community. This is a great segue to another question we're getting a little bit about, and that is, you know, a lot of the I imagine the target market for the North Face are prosumers and consumers. How does what you learn with this group, this, you know, arguably very, very top tier group, inform the research that you do with consumers? And how do you, what's the cadence between those two, doing research on those two groups? You know, like
that's a great one, because I think we recognize that this group is super, super important for us, you know, and for certain product within our line, you know, namely kind of like our series level and our most elite level product. Our athletes really are the muse for what we design and what we create there. So it's kind of a direct one-for-one in terms of how that gets fed into the organization. But we also fully recognize that their feedback could lead us completely astray for a lot of what we do within the organization. And consumer feedback, mainstream feedback is much more appropriate. And so it's always kind of walking that balance and making sure as well that the teams that are asking to do these missions, that they're doing the missions for the appropriate scenario, right? So if it's a product that is more likely to be sold through our maybe more mainstream traditional channels, I'll kind of push back and say, well, are the athletes really the right source of inspiration here, or should you be talking more to somebody that's wearing this on their commute in Chicago, and really making sure that we're getting the feedback from the right source. But I do think, in general, kind of what we're getting from the athlete team can set the tone in a lot of cases for where we want to go within the organization, and really make sure that we're living, kind of staying true to our purpose and our goals, because they're ultimately, if things can pass the athlete sniff test, they're generally going to pass the consumer sniff test. And so I'd say that's the biggest use case is, really making sure that if we can get it past these 150 folks, we're probably going to be all right when we get out to mainstream America.
I imagine that for your consumers, there's some, I don't know, I would love to be, the kind of athlete like, the people you're seeing here on screen. And so I understand the logic behind passing muster with these top 150 might very well pass muster with folks who have hopes of becoming as good as comfortable with the various hobbies that these folks are. I'm curious how you've shared, how do you get because I was really struck by how you weaved the design team, who again, not researchers, quote unquote, by training, but you really weaved the designers into the day-to-day and the collection of the feedback. Can you talk about how because we've got some good questions about how it is you're socializing beyond deliverables. Like, are you adding stakeholders to the mission as viewers, or asking people to take ownership of the missions and that's their first touch with the data? How do you get folks involved and engaged in what is arguably very rich, thick data? I mean, you've got videos, full transcriptions, open-end responses, you've got a lot for them to go through. How do you get them in that platform and engaged?
Yeah, they're definitely not, waiting for kind of the fancy deliverables. If you're kind of like a core person on the team, they're very much in the platform along with us, which is great. Those deliverables that I kind of showed before are more for the broader organization and for more of our leadership levels. But if I'm partnered on a project with a couple of designers, they're in the platform side by side with me, kind of going through and looking at some of this real time. They're bringing it into their, either sketch reviews or creative kickoffs. A big thing within our organization is just, having a story that accompanies your design. I think that's probably true for a lot of organizations. You have the design itself, but what was the impetus for it, and kind of, what is ultimately the needs. And, if we just go into design thinking, kind of human-centered design, this platform really enables, I think, our design teams to do that. In a pretty unique way. So they may just, kind of come in and pull a couple of these stories down, and that becomes, the impetus for them kind of ultimately kind of showing why they've designed something the way that they have.
That's great. And you can message people from the platform, you can tag. Do you find that you're doing a lot of your synthesis and analysis in the platform, or are you exporting images? Are you pulling the data out and using another platform to go in, and do tagging? Or how are you making use of the data?
Yeah, I'd say it's a bit of a mix. I want people to use the platform more fully and really understand some of that functionality, because I think in the past, we would have all these one-off conversations that were living in email with the athlete team. And again, if one designer is asked that question, I don't want the next designer to come in 2 weeks later and ask something very similar. I can't tell you the number of times people used to ask, can I tour your van, Alex? It's like, we've got the van covered. Like, it's only it's only an 8-foot square space. Like, everybody has seen the van at this point. And so it's little things like that, hopefully Alex will never get another request for somebody to videotape the inside of his van.
Yeah, and I love that you said that the athletes before, were maybe hesitant or not as excited about sharing feedback. But now you've said now in the third year of the Athlete Intelligence Program, you're finding that this rather cagey, hard to access group is more willing to and interested in providing feedback. Could you speak a little bit about how they're responding to this effort and initiative that you and the North Face have done?
Yeah, that's been the most rewarding part of it, quite honestly, for me, is I set this up as much, of course, for our employees, but I definitely just recognized a pain point with our athlete team, just engaging with them and interacting at things like our athlete summit. They just had a lot of feedback for me on, look, we say we're athlete tested, expedition proven. That's been a line that's been around the North Face for, more than 50 years since the company was founded. But are we really living true to that? Are things really athlete tested? And I think they wanted to be more involved within the organization on a day-to-day basis. So I was fortunate to have a willing audience there. But how do we connect the dots? And so now going back to those summits and having an athlete just kind of come up to me and say, look, I finally feel like I'm really being heard, and that you guys are taking to heart what I have to say. Like, as a researcher, that's pretty much as good as it gets for me.
Yeah, and I want to dig a little bit on how you communicate to these athletes that they're being heard. I know you said that when you're doing some fieldwork moderation, you might remind them of some of the feedback that their colleagues have given. I'm thinking about these in-person summits where the athletes are able to see the videos of other athletes in the missions. But do you ever share any versions of the deliverables with the athletes, or provide, briefs or roundups of what they learned in the mission? How are the athletes kept in the loop of how you and your team are using what they've provided, if at all?
Yeah, we share just about everything. So anything that goes in front of our leadership team around what we're taking out of the platform, it also goes back to our athlete team. I think that's just something that I kind of set up from the beginning, is if they're going to take the time to give us all this feedback, the least we can do is make sure they're hearing from us on how we're using it, and that we, have we made, incorporated things. And so, that quantitative summary that I sent you, the qualitative stuff, I'll send that to the team and I'll say, look, if I've captured anything, incorrectly, based on what you had to say, please let us know. Because the last thing I want to do is kind of use your quote and your name and all of this, in a way that you wouldn't stand behind. So that opportunity is always there with the team. And I think you'll see as like one of my closing slides here, we also just say thank you, and we show their faces, and we, kind of, that literally was stripped from the D-Scout platform. So that was after one mission. So they literally could see, oh yeah, here, that's me. And that was just an email that went out at the end of a mission. So that they saw, what, look, they pulled me down from this. They got my feedback. Because sometimes they're also thinking, that they're submitting things into a black hole, and it's like, nope, there I am. They heard me.
Yeah.
Ways.
Yeah, that back and forth has got to be so vital for a crew like this. I'm curious, looking ahead, now that you've been using a remote qual platform to do this kind of product-focused feedback, human-centered product feedback, are there other use cases that you think you would like to use D-Scout or other remote platforms for in the future? Like, what other ways do you think you could use this sort of contextual candor and authenticity combination in any organization? I'm thinking about, we have a lot of folks on who are attending who might not be a part of a hard product company, but might have soft products or experiences, or might be in services organizations. What other ways do you immediately see impact by this platform?
Yeah, there's absolutely no reason that this is only a tool that we happen to use with our athlete team. Right now within the organization, it was just where I saw the need and put the right tool to the right need. But we do a ton of consumer work, way more than we do athlete work. And in those cases, either pre-screening for in-person ethnographies or as a replacement to in-person ethnographies in some cases, but almost always we will want to meet the people digitally before we spend 3 hours going on a hike or camping with them, or other things that our organization does to get feedback. So if we can, go through your closet virtually, that's a great way for us to get exposure to 200 closets immediately, rather than going into 200 homes to try to see those closets. So there's, in my mind, just endless different ways that we can apply it. It just happened to be through the athletes that I found the right example first.
No, that's great. I love it. I know I've we've supported work on unboxings. I love that closet tour, steps of a journey, the path to something, or a path to purchase, a journey map. It feels like when you break down whatever you want to learn into moments and you think about all the context you can get per moment, in aggregate, what could you say? What could you do? Especially as you, I think, importantly reminded folks, you can ask quantitative measures or questions, and you don't need a ton. I mean, we're not trying to replace your quantitative practice, but if you have a video, a few open ends, and a few, Likert type or semantic differentials, I mean, you've got mostly the whole package that, again, augments your field work and augments your focus group work. It feels like you're really finding a nice balance between those things.
Yeah, I think so. It's, it's definitely, I think, like any research tool, no single one is right for everything, but it has been right for a lot within our organization.
Yeah. Well, I really do appreciate your sharing this story. For those of you who weren't able to join us at People Nerds San Fran, Vanessa was kind enough to share this story out there, and so we had to drag her in and I guess to the internet and ask her to present again. It's such a cool use case. Again, you are going to get a copy of this. If there are any other questions, we have a few minutes. I want to make sure I get to those. We talked a little bit about honoraria, that it was a part of the contract with some of these folks. We talked a little bit about how it was Vanessa's centralized team working with other groups interested in accessing these athletes. I guess, well, what happened? This is a good question. What happens if an athlete just didn't respond? If you just didn't hear from someone at all? Would you, do you have access to their schedules to know if they are quite literally on the side of a mountain?
We do.
You have any? Okay.
Yeah, we have a daily schedule of where all of our athletes are in the world, and so we know that some may be delayed, in terms of the upload, because they might be on an expedition or something of that sort. But in general, yeah, if an athlete is consistently not responding to a mission, that's something that I take up with our sports marketing team, because it is part of the responsibilities of being an athlete. So in those cases, that's how we'll handle it, and ultimately that person won't be part of the team going forward, because we take it that seriously. That's a number one reason why we have you as part of the team, is to be an ambassador and really help us get smarter and stronger. So
yeah, and they're getting access to early beta and alpha gear that should help them be safer and explore more wherever it is that they're doing that. It does feel like it's a great partnership between them and what is arguably such a great brand.
Yeah, and conversely, I would just say, that those that are giving really rich feedback, I've shared that, and the athletes go through a review process just like, you and I might, within our organization. And so I've certainly shared, so-and-so is just absolutely giving us way more feedback than they need to, within the platform, but it's phenomenal, and they're spending a ton of time. And, that goes, there's a financial impact to the athletes that are also just spending a lot of time and giving us the richness that we really appreciate that, and we make sure that they hear that as well.
Yeah, and I've put Vanessa's info up here. If you'd like to get in contact with her directly, she has done this kind of work across a number of different business units and product units across VF, not just North Face, but the Smart Wool line as well. She's very, very sharp in not only using remote qual, but in using mixed methods broadly defined. She's really good at, if I may speak for you, Vanessa, as your agent now,
yes,
triangulating, you're really, really, really comfortable with and experienced in triangulating different research methods. Is there anything that you want to leave us with, period, or ...
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Ben. For those of you that don't know, the North Face is actually moving on to Denver, and so I'm also transitioning to a new adventure this summer. And so you can see there, I'm actually starting up my own business. So that's a new email for me. But we'll stay heavily involved with VF and the North Face. I'm still super passionate about everything that I've done here over the past 5 years. It's been a great organization, and the work is about as good as it gets as a researcher. So
yeah, I love your introduction when you said you hated being inside, and so you needed to find a way to be a researcher who could be outside for the bulk of your work, and it feels like you have found a pretty nice way of doing that.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, it's all about kind of outside is actually where I get most inspired. It is when we get organizations and companies out and also just bring that outside in, which, I think the D-Scout platform has been a fantastic tool to bring that outside into organizations, which is ultimately what I want to do a lot more of in the future. So
That's great. Well, thank you again. All the best in your new adventures. Thank you all for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you both at UXPA and on the next call. We will share this recording with you. Thanks again. If we weren't able to answer your question, I'll be sure to follow up directly with you. Be well, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Vanessa.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone.